We now come to Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I start by welcoming the announcement of a major breakthrough in the treatment of coronavirus by UK scientists? That's really fantastic news and we're all behind it, and I want to pay tribute to all of those involved. Can I also welcome the Prime Minister's latest U-turn, this time on free school meals? That was the right thing to do, and it's vital for the 1.3 million children who will benefit. It's just one step in the fight against child poverty. A report last week from the government's Social Mobility Commission concluded that there are now 600,000 more children living in relative poverty than in 2012. The report went on to say child poverty rates are projected to increase to 5.2 million by 2022. What does the Prime Minister think caused that?
Well, I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman for what he said about dexamethasone, and I'm glad that he's finally paying tribute to the efforts of this country in tackling coronavirus. But I can tell him that on free school meals, this government is very proud that we set up universal free school meals, and I'm very pleased that we are going to be able to deliver a COVID summer food package to some of the poorest families in this country, and that's exactly the right thing to do. But I must say that I think he's completely wrong in what he says about poverty. Absolute poverty, relative poverty have both declined under this government, and there are hundreds of thousands, I think 400,000 fewer families living in poverty now than there were in 2010.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister says poverty has not increased. I've just read a direct quote from a government report, from a government commission produced last week, which says it's gone up by 600,000. The Social Mobility Commission has a clear answer to my question. This anticipated rise in child poverty is not driven by forces beyond our control. I gave the Prime Minister the number, 600,000. He didn't reply. The report goes on to say, and this is a real cause for concern, and the Prime Minister's chuntering, you might want to listen. Yes. Real cause for concern, because the Commission goes on, I'm sure the Prime Minister's read the report, that it's even... They are really concerned that these projections were made, 5.2 million, before the impact of COVID-19. And they go on to say, which we expect to push more families into poverty. This is a serious issue. I'm sure the Prime Minister would agree that an even higher child poverty rate would be an intolerable outcome from this pandemic. So what's he going to do to prevent it?
Mr. Speaker, I've just understood what the Right Honourable Gentleman is talking about, what he calls an anticipated rise, rather than a rise that has actually taken place. I think a new concept is being introduced into our deliberations. What we're talking about was what has actually happened, Mr. Speaker, which is a reduction in poverty. And I can tell him that, of course, we are concerned. And the whole House will understand that, of course, this government is deeply concerned about the impact of coronavirus on the UK economy. But I think everybody with any fairness would acknowledge that this government has invested massively in protecting the workforce of this country. 11 million jobs protected by the coronavirus job retention scheme, unlike anything done anywhere else in the world. £30 billion worth of business loans, and we intend to make sure that we minimise the impact of coronavirus on the poorest kids in this country. And one of the best ways in which we could do that, by the way, Mr. Speaker, would be to encourage all kids who can go back to school to go back to school now, because their schools are safe. Last week I asked him whether he would say publicly that schools were safe to go back to. He hummed and he hawed. Now's his time to say it clearly. Schools are safe to go back to. Mr. Speaker, your witness.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister obviously hadn't got the first idea what the Social Mobility Report actually said last week, a government body. And he talks to me about consistency and U-turns. The government's had 3 U-turns in the last month. First we had immigration health charges, then we had MPs voting, and then we had free school meals. The only question now is whether U-turns at the dispatch box before or after. 3 U-turns. He argues about one brief one week and one the next. He's an expert in that. Mr. Speaker, This isn't the only area where the government are falling short. During this pandemic, local authorities have been working flat out on social care, on homelessness, obtaining protective equipment for the front line, delivering food and essential supplies. On the 26th of March, the Community Secretary told council leaders directly and in terms, this was a letter to council leaders and a speech, the government stands ready to do whatever is necessary to support councils in their response to coronavirus. Does the Prime Minister believe that the government has kept that promise?
Mr. Speaker, we'll put £3.2 billion extra into local government to tackling coronavirus. But I must say, we didn't hear an answer, did we, Mr. Speaker? How can he talk about tackling the effect of coronavirus on the most disadvantaged? It's the most disadvantaged kids, Mr. Speaker, who need to go back to school, and it is those groups which, unfortunately, at the moment, are not going back to school. Let's hear it from him for one more time. Will he say that schools are safe to go back to? Come on.
Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, this is turning into opposition questions. If the Prime Minister wants to swap places, I'm very happy. We could do it now. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister, the only bit of an answer he gave was about £3.2 billion to the question I asked. Well, it's a lot of money. The Conservative-led local government authority said that they're going to have a shortfall of £10 billion this year. The Health Secretary heckles. The Conservative leader of Lancashire County Council wrote a letter to the Community Secretary a month ago on the 7th of May. And he said this: the overall financial impact on councils nationally and locally will be far in excess of the £3.2 billion provided to date. He went on to say, we would like some assurance from you that all councils will be fully reimbursed for the costs of COVID-19. These are the Prime Minister's own council leaders. He must have known about this problem for months. Why has he been so slow to act?
We haven't, because in addition to the £3.2 billion, we've already put another £1.6 billion to support councils delivering frontline services, plus another £600 million, from my memory, to go into social care. And the reality is, Mr. Speaker, I really want to return to this point about poverty. We want to tackle deprivation in this country. I want kids to go back to school. The unions won't let him say the truth, which is that schools, a great ox has stood upon his tongue, Mr. Speaker. Let him now say that schools are safe to go back to.
Prime Minister.
I spoke... Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister just doesn't get how critical this is. I spoke with council leaders across the country this week. They face a choice. The Prime Minister must know this, between cutting core services or facing bankruptcy under Section 114 notices. Either outcome will harm local communities and mean local services can't reopen. That will drive up poverty, something the Prime Minister says he doesn't intend to do. Local councils have done everything asked of them in this crisis. The government hasn't. Will the Prime Minister take responsibility and actually do something?
Well, Mr. Speaker, with great respect to the right honourable gentleman, I've outlined what we are doing to support local government, and I think that this country can be very proud of the investments that we have made. I think, by the way, that they can be very proud of the incredible work that local government officials have done across this country. But I must say there are some councils, and particularly Labour councils, alas, that are not opening their schools now when they could be opening their schools. And I say to him now, I hope the last time, now is the moment when he can say to those Labour councillors that it is safe for kids to go back to reception, to year 1, to year 6, to early years as they can. Will he now say it?
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, every week the Prime Minister seems to complain that I ask him questions at Prime Minister's questions. If he wants to swap places, so be it. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to return to the Prime Minister's other recent U-turn, the immigration health surcharge for NHS and care workers. Following Prime Minister's questions on the 20th of May, the government announced that it would drop this deeply unfair charge. That's nearly a month ago. Nothing's happened. The BMA, the Royal College of Nursing, the Royal College of Physicians and UNICEF are all written to the Prime Minister. So he must know about this. One doctor was quoted on Monday as saying, "My colleagues who've applied, even yesterday, one of them said he had to pay for himself, his wife and his 4 kids. That's £6,000. He says the Home Office is saying that nothing has been implemented. These are people on the front line. The Prime Minister said he would act. When's he going to do so?
I'm genuinely grateful for an important question, because it is vital that people who are working on the front line and NHS workers in particular get the support that they need. And that's why I said what I said a few weeks ago. And what I can tell him is that NHS or care workers who have paid the surcharge since the 21st of May will be refunded, and we are getting on with instituting the new arrangements as fast as we possibly can.
Leonici.
Mr Speaker, I welcome the Prime Minister's rejection of the extension to the Brexit transition period. Can I ask him if he agrees with me that taking back control of our fishing waters in January 2021 will benefit the fishing communities within the Great Grimsby constituency?
I can tell my honourable friend that it certainly will, and we are going to become once again an independent coastal state. And I know how brilliantly she campaigns for fisheries in Grimsby, and I would urge her to engage with DEFRA to make sure now that the people of Grimsby can exploit the recapture of our spectacular natural marine wealth.
Heading to Scotland, to the leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Marcus Rashford has shown more moral leadership in tackling poverty in a matter of days than this Tory government has in the past decade of cuts. But as he says, people are struggling all year round and more needs to be done. This morning, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and Save the Children have published research showing the ongoing health crisis is causing 6 in 10 families to borrow money, 7 in 10 to cut back on essentials, and over 5 in 10 falling behind on rent and other essential bills. Mr Speaker, an extra £20 a week in social security support would prevent millions of families from having to make the choice of paying their bills or feeding their children. Will the Prime Minister now immediately uplift the child element of universal credit and child tax credit by £20 per week?
Mr Speaker, this is a government that has done everything that we possibly can so far to help families in need, to make sure that nobody is penalised for doing the right thing during the crisis, because I know how difficult it has been. That's why we uprated the universal credit by £1,044, benefiting